I apologize if you hear little footsteps. That is my dog Theo, and he's kind of roaming around my room right now. So this is a very low budget production. I gotta do what I gotta do. Hello my lovelies, I'm Heather and welcome back to my channel, The Happenings with H.A.P. H.A.P meaning my initials. Today I figured we would try out the mid-year book freak out tag. I've seen it done on a couple of other booktuber channels and I really wanted to try it out. It seems like a lot of fun. We are currently in mid-June, so it's the perfect time, literally the middle of the year. The tag is just going to be a bunch of questions about the books that I've read in the first half of 2020 and kind of what I want to do in the second half of 2020. So it should be a lot of fun and let's get on with it. The first question, best book you've read so far this year? I'm totally going to be some cliche Shadowhunter trash when I say that Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare is the best book I've read so far this year. It was definitely one of my most anticipated reads and it lived up to every expectation and then some. This is Cassandra Clare's new trilogy in the Shadowhunter universe, and it is actually a sequel to the original prequel to The Mortal Instruments. So it is a sequel to the Infernal Devices trilogy, while Cassandra Clare says that this is a brand new trilogy and that you do not need to read any of the other previous Shadowhunter series of books. It definitely helps if you've read the Infernal Devices, and I highly suggest you do. I'm not going to give any spoilers because there's a lot of surprises and stuff that happens. That ending though, that ending. Best sequel you've read so far this year? That would have to be A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. This is the second book in the Ember and the Ashes series. The series follows Laya, who is what is referred to as a scholar, which is a race of people that is oppressed by the empire that is in control in this world, which is based on ancient Rome. The story starts with her on a quest to find her brother, who was kidnapped during a raid, and on the journey of finding her brother, she actually ends up discovering more about her parents who had since passed, as well as a way to possibly destroy this empire that has been oppressing her people for generations. This has got fantasy, it's got action, it's got a romance. There's a lot going on. Book 2 in particular had a very devastating cliffhanger of an ending. This is a wonderful fantasy series. It doesn't get talked about as much as some of the other ones, and I highly suggest you take a look at it. A new release you haven't read yet but really want to. I had to double check on my Goodreads TBR list because I TBR books literally all day long, and there's a couple sometimes that I forget about just in the act of TBRing everything that I really want to read. One of them being The Queen's Fortune by Alison Pataki. The novel is historical fiction about Desiree Clary, who I've never heard of. I don't really know much about Napoleonic history, but she was apparently the lover of Napoleon. And this novel follows a bit about her life after her sister marries Napoleon's brother Joseph. I don't really want to know more than that because I like not knowing about some of these figures and getting to discover as I read historical fiction, and then I can look at the actual lives of those figures later and see what's changed and what's not. So I'm really excited about this one. I love my historical fiction, and this book definitely covers a time that I'm not very familiar with, so I'm really excited for this one. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year. That would have to be A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir, which is going to be the fourth and final book in the Ember and the Ashes series. After the end of book 3, I need to know what happens because my heart can't take what happened to Elias at the end of book 3. It was too much. I already gave probably something away with that, but if you've read it, you know, and I've been dying for this book, and I only just read the series this year. I can't imagine how everyone else that's read it earlier is feeling, but I can't wait for this book. Definitely my most anticipated read of the year, for sure. Your biggest disappointment, that would unfortunately have to go to Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. I loved Fangirl, so connected with that character and that story. It definitely brought back a lot of memories of my own college experience, and I was so looking forward to this one because the hype for it is absolutely insane on BookTube, but it just fell really flat for me. I think the biggest problem I had with it was the world building. Now, the story is apparently supposed to be the fan fiction that Kath is writing in Fangirl. However, that fan fiction that she is writing is supposed to be based on a book series, basically a Harry Potter. And this is kind of the culminating end of that story. So essentially the book is supposed to have 7 books worth of world building crammed into it, but you don't see it anywhere. I was reading it and I still didn't really understand the magic system. I didn't understand too much about how the characters interacted with each other, their past relationships. You were told it. I didn't see that, and it's because it was a story that was built on a world that we should already know because it's supposed to be a fan fiction. So it totally fell flat. The romance in it is okay. It's definitely not the best that I've read this year, for sure. I've read much better ones, which I will be talking about very soon in a couple of questions. Baz is a pretty interesting character. Simon, there was nothing there. And the way things kind of ended, I don't know. I know that there's a sequel, Wayward Son. I'm not sure that I'm really going to read it. I might, because I am a completionist and I do like to finish series even if I don't really like them. But it's definitely going to have to be on the back burner. I have so many other books I want to read, and I don't know if I really want to waste my time with it. Your biggest surprise. That would go to If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I had never really read Dark Academia before. In my May wrap-up, I do cover that I read The Secret History, which I wasn't the biggest fan of. This one, however, kind of took me by surprise. I knew the basic premise, that it was theater students and then there was a murder involved. That's kind of all I knew about it. This book is a couple of years old, so it doesn't really get talked about much, and I'm kind of glad for that because I went in knowing nothing and falling in love with this book. It was so wonderful. I went to school for acting, so I really could understand those nuances of being in a group of people that is so close because of the things that you do together. Being in drama school and taking acting classes with the same people over and over again, there is this kind of camaraderie that can't really be mimicked anywhere else except if you're actually working on a show or a film with people. I've experienced it many times. It's a very strange kind of working relationship, friendship, and the relationships that develop from that kind of an environment is so insular and you get so close to people. It's totally different than if you have like a coworker relationship. It's not nearly the same. There's a vulnerability, there's a passion involved. This book definitely brought back memories of my time in acting school, minus the murder. And I actually really enjoyed all these characters. The characters were very nuanced and very different types of people. They weren't archetypes, I don't feel. They had many layers, and especially in regards to talking about theater kids, that's not something you get to see a lot. And that ending, I want a sequel. I don't even know if it could have a sequel, but I want one. It was so well done. I highly, highly recommend. Your new favorite author or author who is new to you. That would, once again, she comes up on this list, Sabaa Tahir. I fell in love with the Ember and the Ashes series. It is a beautifully written fantasy series that kind of borders adult and YA. The books can actually be kind of hard to read sometimes because of the depictions of slavery and abuse. So that's something to keep in mind if you do want to tackle the series. I highly recommend you do. The love story is so well done. Such a slow burn, and that's what makes it so good. And I feel for these characters because their lives are so tragic, and I just want them to have a happy ending. And I'm not sure I'm gonna get it, and that really makes me sad. However, I will now read anything she writes. She's one of my new favorite authors. I hope she has more fantasy series after this. I'm so on board. I love her. Your newest fictional crush. I'm kind of a little old for crushes, but I can fall in love with the characters and the world that they live in. So I had to pick Elias from An Ember in the Ashes. This is just basically a Sabaa Tahir love video, essentially, is what it seems like at this point. What's so great about him is how he's going against a system of oppression that he was brought up in. A lot of the things he's done in the past are not good, and he'll say that himself, but he wants to get out. He wants to help other people that he was taken away from himself. And his relationships in the book, both with his friend and the woman he loves, are so complex. He has a lot of wonderful qualities, and the biggest is his ability to see the corruption around him and trying to do something about it, and not necessarily in a way that's always beneficial to himself. It's for others. It's because of his compassion and love for others. That's what makes him such a wonderful character. A book that made you cry. I've definitely not cried with anything I've read this month. However, I'm going to use this prompt more as a book that really opened my eyes in a new way, and that would be The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This is one that I had kind of come across. I think it was on Goodreads around when it came out, and I read the synopsis and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to read this. It's probably one of the most interesting pieces of fantasy that I've ever heard about. During the last few weeks, I've really had an internal look at kind of media content that I consume and how I do tend to, even subconsciously without realizing it, read primarily white voices. And I'm making an effort now to include more voices of color in my reading. I think that the bias may be subconscious, but a lot of it is probably just what is being marketed towards me. So if I like a plot, I will read it. I don't really care who wrote it, but that's also my own privilege as a white woman to be able to say that. I don't have to care. So every month I'm going to read at least one book written by a person of color. I've expanded the avenues for my recommendations, so now I will see that more often and be more inundated with that kind of content, and also actively try to promote those things. And not in a way, and I'm trying to word this as best as I can, and not in a way that makes it seem like, oh, I have to do that. It's like, no. People of every color write amazing novels. And it's really, really fucking frustrating that publishing, marketing, media wants to put those voices in a box that will only be seen by their own race. And I'm probably worded that horribly, but I'm actively trying to open my horizons and explore new things. Now back to this book. The premise is essentially, what if African slave women that were pregnant and thrown overboard during the transatlantic passage had actually given birth underwater and their children, through some sort of magic, became mermaids? It's definitely a concept of the mermaid trope that I've never seen, and it's a brilliant one. The plot of the novel centers around Yetu, who is her people's memory holder. What this essentially means is she is the only one who is able to know where her people came from, and also the horrors and the abuses and everything else that they suffered. It lives within her, and they have this sort of ritual I believe it's every year or every 3 years, where they all come together and she releases the memories to them so that they can experience it and never forget where they came from. There's so many layers to this book. Among many things that are amazing about it is it's a tangible description of what generational trauma is. Yetu is literally overcome with the memories that she is forced to carry that the rest of her people don't have to carry, and the weight of it actually ends up almost destroying her. See, I'm getting like kind of emotional even thinking about it. There's so much to unpack in this book. If there's one book from this video that I think you should read, it should be this one. As a piece of fantasy, it's so wonderful. I wanted more. Like, I wanted more of these characters, more of this world. I mean, aside from generational trauma and the identity of your society and race, it even goes into gender identity. It ticks off so many boxes, and not enough people are talking about this book. And if you are a white person who is watching this channel and you really want to understand the weight of generational trauma, this would be a book for you to read, especially if you are not one that likes to read the more nonfiction essays on race relations and stuff like that. This is probably a good start and a good way to ease into that. I recommend this for literally everyone watching. If there's one book I recommend, it's gonna be this one. A book that made you happy. This one would definitely have to go to Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is probably one of the best romance books I've read in a long time. The relationship between Alex and Henry is just, it's steamy. It is a slow burn. The story follows Alex Diaz, who is the first son of the first woman president of the United States. He's actually also biracial. And Henry, who is the Prince of Wales. What's really interesting about this book, aside from the relationship, is the political aspect of their relationship, in how they have to go about keeping things a secret, things come out, all that type of stuff. I wasn't really actually expecting the political aspect of the book, because usually contemporary romances kind of throw a lot of those types of real world problems out the window, and this actually explores them. And I know that this book is all over BookTube. If you're looking for a really wonderful gay contemporary romance, this is the one. There's a reason everyone's talking about it. Your favorite book to film adaptation? I guess I would have to go with the 2019 Emma. I'm actually planning on making a video about it, so I'm not gonna go too in depth, but it was really well done and I really enjoyed it. Your favorite video you've made this year? This is actually my 4th video that I've filmed, so not a lot of them, but I would have to say probably the BookTube newbie tag, since that was the first video I filmed. And my most cringiest would definitely have to be my May 2020 wrap up, because the editing on that, because of how much of a mess I made trying to describe things, is just awful. So I'm hoping that this one is better. Most beautiful book you've bought or received this year? I have not bought any books this year so far, so I can't say that technically, but I guess the most beautiful cover of the audiobooks that I've read is going to be Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. I adore the Shadowhunter covers, so this one, of course, would be a win for me. And lastly, some books you need to read before the end of the year. Aside from A Sky Beyond the Storm, because that's not being released till December, the other two would be The Lost Book of the White by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu, which is part of the Eldest Curses trilogy, which is yet another Shadowhunter series, but it's actually an adult Shadowhunter series. I wasn't the biggest fan of The Red Schools of Magic. I gave it about a 3.5 stars. However, I really love the Alex and Magnus pairing, and I will of course have to read this because, as I said in the beginning of this video, I am very much Shadowhunter trash. The other book that I really can't wait for is The Nobleman's Guide to Scandal and Shipwrecks by Mackenzie Lee. This is going to be the 3rd book in the Montague Siblings trilogy, which includes The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue and The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy. I fell in love with The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue when I first read it, and I devoured the other sequels as quickly as possible, so I've been dying for this one. This one follows Adrian, who is the youngest brother of Monty and Felicity, who are the characters that are the main characters in the first 2 books. And the only thing I know about it is that he is searching for Monty and Felicity because he's never actually met them. He was baby/toddler age, if I remember correctly, in the first 2 books. And I don't care. I love her writing style. I love the audiobooks that accompany these, so I am so hyped for this one. And we did it! That is the mid-year book freakout tag. I hope you enjoyed. I went on a couple tangents, but I've had a really good first half of 2020 in my reading, and I'm hoping to have a really good second half. If you know of any more books that I haven't mentioned that I should be reading before 2020 is over, please put them down below. I'm always open and I'm always adding to my TBR, so even if I don't get to it, I definitely want to read it soon. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye! So it's a prequel to The Infernal Devices. No, it is not. Flown over the radar. Most anticipated, and The Lady's Guide to and The Lady's Guide. Oh my god, why can't I speak? Why can't I speak?